"You get out now," said Harry, more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him or Ron. "But we don't feel like living, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some." Goyle reached toward the chocolate frog next to Ron. Ron leaped forward, but before he'd much to touch Goyle, Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers, the rat, was hanging off his finger. Sharp little teeth sunk Goyle, swung Scabbers round and round, howling, and when Scabbers finally flew up and hit the window, all three of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought they were more rats lurking among the sweets. Or perhaps they'd heard footsteps, because a second later Hermione Granger had come in. "What has been going on?" she said, looking at the sweets all over the floor and Ron picking up Scabbers by his tail. "I think he's been knocked out," Ron said to Harry. He looked closer at Scabbers. "Now, I don't believe it. He was going back to sleep." And so he had. "You've met Malfoy before?" Harry explained about the meeting in Diagon Alley. "I've heard of his family," said Ron darkly. "They were some of the first to come back in our side after you-know-who disappeared. Say they been twitched." "My dad doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side." He turned to Hermione. "Can we help you with something? You'd better hurry and put your robes on." "I've just been up to the front to ask the conductor, and he says we're nearly there." "You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before we even get there." "Scabbers has been fighting, not us," said Ron, scowling at her. "Would you mind leaving while we change?" "All right. I only came in here because people outside are behaving very childishly." "Racing up and down the corridors," said Hermione in a sniffy voice. "And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know?" Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out of the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forest under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off their jackets and pulled on their long black robes. Ron was a bit short for him. You could see his sneakers underneath them. A voice echoed through the train. "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be taken to school specially." Harry's stomach lurched with nerves and Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. They gained their pocket with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd throwing the cordial their way toward right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way, slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed Harry shiver in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the head of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. First year over there." "All right there, Harry." Harry's big, hairy face beamed over the sea of head. "Come on, follow me. Any more first years?" "Mind you, stop. Now, first years, follow me." Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was very dark on the other side of them that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, a boy who kept losing his toe, sniffled once or twice. "You'll get your first sight of Hogwarts in a sec," Hagrid called over the shoulder. Just round this bandit. There was a loud "Hoo!" The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake, perched atop a high mountain on the other side. Its windows sparkling in the starry sky, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. "No more fool over that," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats stinging in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were following into their boat by Neville and Hermione. "Anyone in?" shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. "Right then, forward!" And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, leading across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was still silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff of which it stood. "Head down!" yelled Hagrid as the first boat reached the cliff. They all bent their head, and the little boats carried them, though a curtain of ivy had hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carrying a long, dark tunnel which seemed to be taking them right toward where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. "Oh, you there! Is this your Toad?" said Harry, who was checking the boat as people climbed out of them. "Trevor!" cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. Then, coming out of a lost onto smooth damp grass right in the shadow of the grass, they walked up a flight of stone and crowded around the huge oak front door. "Everyone's here. You there? Still got your Toad?" Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door.